Hi everyone, and welcome to my Abattoir of Zir feedback video. So it has been out for around 2 days now. I've been blasting really hard on my rogue. Managed to clear a tier 14 with my penetrating shot rogue here on hardcore so far. And I want to talk about this system in general. There's a lot of relatively negative feedback about it, and I do have some of my own there. I do think that not everything about Abattoir of Zir is bad, but there are definitely, there's a lot of room for improvement in my opinion. So I have a bunch of topics here that I want to talk about. It's just like a little list that I just made to guide you through this video. I'm going to be talking about just the features in general, then about the rewards, about the difficulty, the Bloodseekers, and a bunch of other things here. And finally, the exploits. So this is what we're going with. And you might not agree with everything, but I also think that it's a pretty good initiative by Blizzard to kind of give us this new type of endgame content in the middle of a season. This is definitely something that we could expect to be a seasonal main feature, like a main update feature for a season launch. And I gotta give credit to Blizzard for actually trying to do something like this, even if it's not anywhere close to perfect. So I just want to say that right at the start. I think it's pretty cool. But I think also that Blizzard really needs to kind of step up the game here in many ways to make this an actual, viable permanent feature in the future or so. So let's get started talking about some basic features here. So this is basically Diablo 3 Greater Rift. And the way that Diablo 3 Greater Rifts work is they have leaderboards. They have, streamlined progression. They're really fine-tuned these days. There is, stuff like you can see the timer. After the run is over, you can see the tier that you're actually running. So much of the stuff is actually missing from just the interface, for example, right now, that should be there. This is like the absolute bare minimum, I believe. Like here, for example, it doesn't tell me anywhere on my interface, what tier is this? If I make a screenshot, if I make a video about this, we have this max roll leaderboard, for example, and you finish the run, and at the end, it doesn't even tell you how long it took and these kind of things. So I think that if you want to have a feature like this in a game, then it definitely needs a bit of an improvement here on the UI department. So the UI is definitely one of the weaker parts here for this entire system. I also think that there should just be more information displayed. For example, why are the afflictions hidden? Are there even afflictions actually at this point? I don't even know, to be honest, because it just says 0 afflictions anyway. So I'm not sure if this is supposed to say 0, if there are afflictions. Are they just hidden and I have no idea? Honestly, I have not really noticed anything that there are even afflictions, and I've went all the way to tier 15 already. So it seems like there's just no afflictions really. But either way, there are definitely some pretty weird design choices here. Now, for the second part, the content, I think that the way that the system generally works is fine. So I know that some people are longing for something that can just blast, go through. There's no objectives like in Nightmare Dungeons. You just go and grind it out basically. And some people just like this super streamlined progression. Personally, I'm actually more of a fan of Nightmare Dungeons, I gotta say, because when I go into a Nightmare Dungeon, at least I know what I got. And at least when it comes to a pushing, a high-end challenge, the RNG that is in the Abattoir of Zir is extremely noticeable because it's just not balanced. Monster types are not balanced. Maps are not balanced. It makes a huge difference what you're getting. This is not really any surprising news, I guess, to anyone who's played Diablo 3, but it's really bad in this system right now in Diablo 4. So this is kind of a problem here, I think. And I think that, in general, just grinding this system on end is not really that exciting. I did it for a while now, maybe I grinded 10 hours or something like that. And I felt like I'm kind of over it, basically, in terms of grinding, because it's just kind of the same thing over and over. I just rush, through my 3-minute clears, and I don't really get anything that is really tangible. So it just feels that, yeah, it's too little, basically. And that also brings me to the topic of rewards. So the reward is you can level up your glyphs relatively fast, but I guess most people going into this that are any kind of serious about it actually have the glyphs leveled already, or at the very least very close to it, because this is a really high-end system, post T100 Nightmare Dungeons. So people usually have pretty decked out characters trying this in the first place. So the only reward is really the Glyph XP. You don't really care about the loot. I think the loot that you get in there is actually okay. I heard people complaining that, oh, it's not 925. I mean, who cares, you know? The only item that needs to be 925 in your setup is a weapon, and you probably have that from Duriel already, and if not, from a world boss. And, you know, 900 plus loot is totally acceptable in, you know, in like every scenario, I think. The main issue rather is that there's nothing else, really. Like, I do get like those 4 random items, but like at the very minimum, I think there could be, for example, a chance to get Uber Uniques in there. You know, why not? This is like the highest end content in the entire game. Way harder than Duriel, way harder than Lilith, way harder than T100 9-bit dungeons. And honestly, why are there no Uber Uniques in this thing? You know, if there was, let's say, a 0.5% chance that when you finish an Abattoir run, you get an Uber Unique, you know, this would actually give people something to grind for, something to hope for, and also solo players an actual chance to get Uber Uniques in the first place. And then you can maybe scale up that chance a little bit, you know, per tier. Let's say, you know, tier 2 is like 0.6%, tier 3 is 0.7, etc. So, you know, something like a bit of like a scaling reward there to make it a bit more exciting, to like, you know, you keep running it and maybe you still haven't found your Shaku after like 400 Duriel runs, but you just grind it out now and boom, you know, eventually you might get it. So that would be at least something, I think. So that is kind of missing, and like this, I don't really have like anything to chase here. I mean, I do already have my Uber Uniques, but I think for a lot of other people, this is not really the case. They would probably appreciate something like that and would make it just way more exciting instead of just like effectively adding Diablo 3 Paragons. So this is basically what the glyph of the Tears of Blood glyph is. It's basically Diablo 3 Paragons. It is basically infinite power progression, just like in Diablo 3, just in a different package. And that is really something that Diablo 4 should never have, in my opinion. I think like Diablo 3 Paragons are pretty universally disliked with how they work. I do know that some people like grinding them, and some people do like to log in and grind something and get stronger every single time, even if it's just by this tiny bit. But realistically, I think this is extremely unhealthy for the long-term future of Diablo 4 to have a system like Diablo 3 Paragons that is effectively an infinite grind. So I think like one of the really strong parts of Diablo 4 versus Diablo 3 is the finite power progression. This is also something that the developers have highlighted in you know, various, you know, campfires or whatever. I remember them talking about it. Diablo 4 has a finite progression system, and now it no longer has that. Even if like you only have these super small incremental increases, it's basically Diablo 3 Paragon, and we should never have anything like that, in my opinion. And on top of this, it's not even fun to level it up because of it being so slow. And that brings me to the next point, is the Glyph XP itself. So we had some, you know, napkin math done here, for example, by Rex. In this clip, I'm actually watching Rex's feedback video myself. So that's kind of funny, but basically it takes like many hours. You know, we're talking about like 200 plus hours to get your glyph even to level 50. And 50 is nowhere near level 200 was the maximum. So when Abattoir of Zir was announced and we heard about the glyph being like up to level 200, I figured that, you know, it would be extremely grindy to get to 200, but it would be very easy to get to level 50. So I expected that, you know, someone who grinds this out for a little bit at least can get like this, you know, radius upgrade on level 50. Similar to how you get the other glyphs to level 15. And then from there on, it kind of scales up and it becomes like some insane grind that it can kind of get a bit stronger over time. But I expected it would see people actually reaching level 200, you know, if they like invest, let's say 500 hours or something like that, and they go mega ham. But what is actually happening is that we're probably not going to see a single person, at least solo, grinding it to even level 50. This is kind of like the reality that we see right now, and that is insane in my opinion. So not only is like this glyph that's just you're not able to max it out, but also you're like not even close. You're not even close to even getting to like this kind of like shining, you know, breakpoint where you have like this power spike and you feel like, you know, now your character is done, right? So this is just, you know, how glyphs work. You know, you rank them up to 15 and then they increase and you change your setup, and this is just completely missing. So everyone is going to have like the smaller radius glyph, and like all those setups that I prepared, that are completely like, you know, worthless basically, because no one is ever going to have a level 50 glyph. So that is just a major problem with the entire system, I believe. And that brings me to our next point, like what is actually the purpose of Abattoir of Zir? And what can we make out of this? So in my opinion, I think there should be no Tears of Blood glyph. I think it's okay to have this as like a seasonal kind of thing right now. You know, it's something to like, you know, log in again and, you know, you have like a bit of a power spike and whatever, right? But realistically, since no one can actually level up their glyph and it takes so long to do that, like I had some initial plans to grind the glyph all the way to 200. Then day one, the Abattoir of Zir came out and I realized that is not happening. Let's maybe go for 50. Yeah, by now, I went back to, yeah, maybe let's grind at least to rank 10 and then leave it there and just kind of push. And I didn't even do that. I'm like at 8.5 now, and I just decided, okay, like, why do I even want to grind this glyph? It takes so long. It gives me like, you know, 2% or like 1% DPS, you know, per level. And I'd rather just spend like a few more hours actually pushing instead of trying to get this super tiny upgrade. So I think that the glyph just should not exist, honestly, at least for like a permanent feature in this game. And instead, there should be no actual power progression in here. I think it's fine to get a bit of loot, you know, as I described, like the Uber uniques and stuff like that. That's okay. You know, you can get them in other places too, but there should be nothing exclusive to this system, basically, because the glyph is basically exclusive to the Abattoir of Zir, because if you try to rank it up in Nightmare Dungeons, hallelujah. So in that case, I think it would be better if there was actually no reward at all, really, or like just like this tiny, like maybe a bit of loot reward. And this was exclusively a type of content that is used to benchmark your build and for competition. I think playing the Abattoir of Zir, at least on a push, on like a high tier, when you like try to beat the timer and you know you try to really push your character and your skills, and you actually learn something about the game. I actually had like a really great learning experience so far. Just trying to push, for example, for tier 14 or tier 15 on my rogue. And it is content that we don't have anywhere else in the game. Now, that being said, I think this could be adjusted. For example, I think that on the higher end, the monsters definitely do live a little bit too long. You have to rely on making large pulls a little bit too much. And, you know, you fight like a single elite, like 2 minutes at a time or something like that. You have to make massive pulls of like, you know, 5 to 10 elites at once. And it kind of brings us back to Diablo 3 days, I guess, of greater burst pushing, which is something I thoroughly enjoyed. But it's probably a bit too slow, in my opinion. So I think maybe if they, you know, increase the progression required by like, let's say 25% or so, so that you kind of forced to go through the whole thing a bit faster, and go lower tiers basically, and stuff dies faster, I think that would feel a lot better. Right now it's like a bit too slow paced when it comes to actually going through a high tier push. But basically what this would do is that it would make it, you know, it would give this content some kind of purpose, I think. I don't think we really need something like Greater Rifts in Diablo 4 right now. We do have Nightmare Dungeons, and I think those were intended to be the replacement of Greater Rifts anyway. And there could definitely be like many more adjustments done for Nightmare Dungeons. Blizzard has already started doing that with, for example, removing objectives entirely. So we already have Nightmare Dungeons that are almost exactly what this is, to be honest. And if there's like more tweaks in the future, or, you know, Nightmare Dungeons kind of gets like a version 2 at some point or something like that, then we basically have what Abattoir would be doing right now in terms of the grind. And I think the Abattoir itself could be this kind of like, you know, leaderboard mode. And it should not have really like this super high entry ticket cost, like 800 sigil powder just for a tier 1. I started this patch with 80,000 sigil powder, and I was preparing for this, you know, for weeks basically. And then the exploit came around, and people just have like a million sigil powder that I'm competing with, and I kind of doubt Blizzard is banning for that. But I decided to not use the exploit, and well, I'm running out of sigil powder extremely fast, so I cannot even like attempt, you know, a push very much, which is something that I would really enjoy doing right now. With the cost of entry being so high, I have to like really preserve my like every single sigil basically, and very quickly I will just like run out of attempts to even go in there. And I don't want to go back to like grind out my glyph right now, because grinding the glyph is completely pointless. And I'm just kind of like, okay, like, you know, I wanna actually have fun with something that the game doesn't offer me anywhere else, which is the pushing part. And I just can't really do this for a long time. I'm actually completely fine on my elixirs and instances, and I have enough scrolls of escape even here on hardcore still. Like I was very careful, very resourceful with all these things, and I figured, okay, like my almost 100k sigil powder is definitely gonna last me a while. But I never imagined I would be so handicapped by the sigil powder in the end. And I think this is way worse even for other people. I've seen other people like tell me that they just go in there, they die a bunch of times, they have like 5k sigil powder, and they craft 5 sigils, and you know, they die a few times and this is it, and they have no more sigil powder and no motivation to go back to do like a nightmare dungeon to grind more sigils, to then after like 3 runs craft 1 sigil for Abattoir and try again and then get 1 shot at the end, right? So there is definitely like this kind of like way too high cost, I think, like of a ticket to even get in there, and that kind of makes it like less fun, especially with like how unbalanced it is in terms of like high-end pushing with the different monster types and different maps. There are definitely like extremely strong combinations and extremely weak combinations, and when I go in, there's like a 1 in 10 chance or so I can actually play the run if I try to push like a tier 15 right now. And everything else, I just don't even have to attempt anymore. I tried, you know, many different things. I tried different maps and monsters, and I made a tier list about which are the better ones and the worst ones. And yeah, I mean, I'm just looking for the good stuff, right? And there's no way I can beat a tier 15 right now if I don't get the good stuff, basically. So we're already getting to this fishing part of Diablo 3. Creator is pushing extremely quickly, but you can barely do it, and then you're just stuck. And my next point also touches what I just previously mentioned with people running out of sigil powder. Even if you don't try to push, like, you know, and like fish for like a good map or something like that, people just run out of sigil powder because the difficulty is so high. Now, personally, and I think this might be an unpopular opinion, but I think it is required. It's not just good, it's actually required that the Abattoir of Zir is really hard, in the sense that you actually take a lot of damage. Now, the thing is that, yeah, people are dying really easily in this mode, but I think this mostly has to do with the Bloodseekers. And to be honest, I think the rest of the monsters in Abattoir of Zir are fairly balanced. If you go in with a high-end build, with a tanky setup, you can survive. Like, even as a rogue, you know, I can go through it. And yeah, it happens that sometimes, you know, I get surprised by something or whatever, but, you know, the game is out for not even half a year. We're all still noobs, basically. And, you know, this actually teaches you something about the game if you are willing to try and learn it, basically. And personally, I'm also getting a lot better at surviving in this mode. And I think if you do more of this, you will too. I think it's just that a lot of people are not used to any kind of difficulty in Diablo 4 at all. And this is why they're like extremely surprised, and they go in with like suboptimal setups. They don't have their 13,700 armor. Some people don't even have their res capped. Some people have like 1 defensive aspect on their gear. Yeah, of course you're gonna get annihilated, you know, this is just how it works. I think that making the content like too easy in terms of survivability would make it extremely boring. I think people would get bored by this even faster, even if right now it might be frustrating. And the reason for that is that, well, if you make these monsters not be very dangerous, then they're just punching bags, basically, right? You're just gonna stand there and like whack away for like, you know, 2 minutes at an elite, and this is literally it, right? And there's like no difficulty anymore, because you can actually get to a point where people will just not die like ever to anything. And this is already happening with some builds, like the Select variants of Barbs and Sorks, for example. They are effectively immortal when you go in there. There's also like low-life Sork builds with barriers, you know, a bunch of stuff like that, basically. There are various combinations of you know, like affixes and, you know, stats that you can use to become effectively immortal in this game. And in that case, it just becomes extremely boring, right? Because you don't care about what the monsters are doing. There's no outplay. And then this entire purpose that I just described with like having something to strive for, some pushing mode, something that challenges you, would just completely fall apart. And this is honestly exactly the feedback that I've gotten from other people that are playing these kind of Select builds, for example. They just tell me, like, you know, it's just boring. You just go in, you know, nothing touches you. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to play a mode like this, to be honest, you know. I think this being quite difficult is fine, but there could be other tweaks to the difficulty. For example, why are there like 0 lives remaining? I think this is kind of unnecessary. I think there could be like a penalty similar to Diablo 3 Greater Rifts. I think Diablo 3 did that relatively well. For example, like giving you an extra penalty for the timer, right? So you die and then you get like a 5-second penalty, and you die again, you get a 10-second penalty, and so on. And, you know, it would still be like, you know, really preferable to not die at all in there. But it wouldn't be like, you know, do like one little mistake and you're out. I think this is probably what frustrates people much more than actually dying, you know, especially paired with the fact that the sigil cost is so high. So you die once and you're like, oh man, I lost like 15 minutes of grinding sigil powder now. And, you know, this happens a few times and then you're out, right? So if you just like have a bit of like a penalty on the timer, then people could still go through it. You know, they could still grind out the lower tiers and, you know, sometimes, you know, not go really try hard, and, you know, it's like really sweaty, right? Even if you farm tier 1s, because the monster damage is still pretty much the same on tier 1 versus tier 15. It's just like everything dies way faster. That makes it a bit safer, but some stuff really hurts and hits like a truck. So that kind of like just upping the revive limit or just removing this revive limit and instead giving a time penalty, since there is already the timer, would be way more preferable in my book. And now finally, let's talk about the Bloodseekers. So when you finish the run, you get those 3 Bloodseekers, and I think this is actually an excellent choice they made here. So when I played this back, when I was at the Blizzard headquarters, there were just like the dungeon bosses, and they were just punching bags basically. They didn't hurt you, and you're just standing there for like 5 minutes, just like, and that was it. It was extremely boring. And I think replacing those bosses with Bloodseekers is an excellent idea, but the implementation of it definitely needs more work. So number one, what you're seeing right now here in this clip actually is, you know, the Bloodseekers are not tied together as a team. Like, they spawn and then they come at you one by one, or you can just kite them around until you 1v1 them basically. And that's kind of like the strat how to solve this extremely difficult fight at the end, right? Like, for builds that are not really tanky, you just 1v1 them, and it's actually much more boring than it should be, in my opinion. And on top of this, the Bloodseekers are just like over-tuned as hell, I think. Like, you can easily die to them, even if you breeze through the run. And I think that makes it even more frustrating with this like 0 revives. You just go through the run and then the Bloodseekers just boom, one-shot you. This has even happened to me basically, and it's just doesn't feel that good. I think the Bloodseeker fights are actually pretty decent if you could actually outplay them a bit more. So I think what needs to happen is that the Bloodseekers get tuned down a lot, like their damage output just needs to be tuned down, and they always stick together. Like, I would really enjoy a 1v3 against the Bloodseekers if they did, like, let's say half the damage of what they're doing right now. So I can actually fight all 3 of them at once, and then it's not like, you know, I kill this guy in 1 minute, I kill this guy in 1 minute, I kill this guy in 1 minute. Oh wait, this guy has Vampiric, I guess I won't kill him, you know? So first of all, there are some of these affixes like Vampiric that just makes it nearly impossible to actually finish one of these Bloodseekers if they roll Vampiric. I've not seen many people being able to kill a Vampiric Bloodseeker on like a, you know, a noteworthy tier basically. You know, outside of that, I think they're just like overtuned. I think they're just too strong. And also, like, they spawn, like if you run disobedience aspect, your disobedience drops off, the barb leaps at you, you're dead. You know, this kind of stuff. And it's just like, it's just too much, I think. So I think what needs to happen is that the Bloodseekers get re-evaluated at least. I think they're generally a good choice as kind of like the you know, pinnacle encounter in this mode, because it also really goes well with the theme, for example. But I also noticed some other funny stuff about Bloodseekers. For example, they don't even count as undead. So I tried actually using an undead slaying elixir. There's literally nothing. You know, there are also these other problems with those Bloodseekers. And they seem to be designed to be some bit of like a challenge in, like, let's say even outdoor content, right? You go to Blood Harvest, and the only thing that can ever really touch you there are Bloodseekers, for example. But then they just took exactly those Bloodseekers and just scaled them up to, like, you know, infinity basically, and everyone just dies to them really easily, including myself. I have like the tankiest rogue build you could possibly make, really, and even I can have issues against those Bloodseekers. So it's pretty crazy, and this is like in a 1v1, you know, it's not 1v3, so there definitely needs to be some tuning there. And my last point for this video is the exploits. So there are at least 3 pretty major exploits that we have found already for this mode that can be used by various people. So number one, I've mentioned this already with like the infinite sigil powder. So there was like an exploit, I think that's fixed actually, but you were able to craft and salvage tier 7 sigils for more than the cost. So you could just get infinite sigil powder, and people just went up to 1 million sigil powder. So that was kind of stupid, but I think that's done now. But another bigger problem is that there is actually a way to bug out the timer, and when you basically spawn the Bloodseekers exactly at the last second, when you have like, you know, 9 minutes 59 seconds elapsed, apparently the timer bugs out and you just have infinite amount of time to kill a Bloodseekers, which is pretty stupid, honestly. So this is probably why we're gonna see a tier 25 completion very soon, which otherwise would not be possible, I guess. And then there is a third exploit that for Sorks right now, you can just infinitely spawn Hydras. Maybe this works with other pets as well, I'm not sure. Maybe like, you know, Necrominions or something. I'm not sure if someone has tried this, but you can just spawn Hydras and get progression all the time, basically. And you can just stand at the start of the run and just spawn Hydras. And those Hydras, when they despawn, give you progression. So that is kind of weird. And I actually have like a screenshot of this that someone sent me. that I believe is exactly what happened there. You see here, this is the entire run. They're like in the second room and they finished the run. And yeah, this is probably how that actually came to be. Maybe this was like a build that included Hydra and they just kept spawning Hydras and getting a lot of progression. That seems to be a thing and potentially could be even combined with the previous exploit where maybe you spawn the Hydra exactly at a 10-minute mark and then you actually just have infinite amount of time. So you have to kill nothing and then you have infinite amount of time for the Bloodseekers. So you can literally do every single tier in the game, I guess. So that is obviously kind of stupid. So there needs to be some fixes for this to have any kind of meaning, especially if you want to have a leaderboard around this. But yeah, this is all of the points that I have for now. So in my opinion, Abattoir of Zir, like TLDR, I guess, is more like a benchmark tool for builds. It needs to be, you know, easier to get there. It needs to be easier to get through it. The Bloodseekers need retuning. And if there's going to become any kind of like permanent feature, I think it would be cool to have leaderboards for this, but not anything that you want to grind out in there. Like the Glyph, for example, I think is a major problem. I don't want infinite power progression. I just want this to be like, you know, something that you can do, but you don't have to do as kind of like part of your character's journey. I think this will be a lot more interesting if people weren't like really like forced into the system. And this is, you know, not like a system that you have to progress in after doing everything else in the game, for example. So this is my opinion on the entire thing so far. Let me know what you think. Maybe you have different opinions, but yeah, apparently Blizzard is also going to tweak things a little bit. So let's see. I think they want to announce a few changes anyway. So I wanted to get my opinion out on this. A lot of people have been asking me. So here it is. Hope you enjoyed this relatively long video now. I'm going to be back and blasting more. I'm going to try to hit at least like a tier 15 on my rogue. And then we'll see if I'm going to try other classes or something. So we'll see what happens. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.